Hello everyone, and welcome to History of the Ancient World. Today we're diving into a topic that's often overlooked or simplified, the role of women in antiquity. When we think of ancient civilizations like Greece, Rome, or Egypt, we often picture powerful men, philosophers, emperors, and pharaohs. But what about the other half of the population? Were women just silent figures in the background, confined to the home? The reality is far more complex, vibrant, and fascinating. From priestesses and queens to poets and business owners, women in the ancient world played diverse and crucial roles that shaped their societies in ways we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. So, join me as we journey back in time to uncover the hidden stories and surprising power of women in antiquity. Let's start our journey in ancient Egypt, a civilization famous for its pyramids, pharaohs, and a surprisingly progressive view of women's rights, at least compared to its contemporaries. Unlike in many other ancient societies, Egyptian women could own, inherit, and manage property. They could enter into legal contracts, run businesses, and even bring cases to court. We have records of women buying and selling land, operating breweries, and managing textile workshops. Legally, they were seen as partners to their husbands, not property. Marriage was a personal agreement, and divorce was possible for both men and women. Of course, the pinnacle of female power in Egypt was the role of the female pharaoh. Figures like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra are legendary. Hatshepsut ruled for over 2 decades, not as a regent for a young son, but as a full-fledged pharaoh in her own right. She oversaw massive building projects, launched successful trade expeditions, and maintained peace and prosperity. To legitimize her rule in a male-dominated world, she often had herself depicted with male attributes, including a false beard, but she never hid the fact that she was a woman. Her reign was one of Egypt's most prosperous periods. Then there's Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was a brilliant political strategist, a skilled diplomat who spoke multiple languages, and a commander who held her own against the rising power of Rome. While often romanticized, her story is fundamentally one of a powerful ruler fighting to protect her kingdom. These powerful queens show us that in Egypt, at least for the elite, the highest office in the land was not always closed to women. But what about the everyday woman? While most women weren't pharaohs, their contributions were vital. The most respected role for a woman was that of a wife and mother, or mistress of the house. They were responsible for managing the household, raising children, and overseeing domestic production like baking bread and weaving cloth. But this was far from a trivial role. A well-run household was the backbone of the Egyptian economy and society. Beyond the home, women could also become priestesses, serving various gods and goddesses. These positions held great prestige and influence. For example, the god's wife of Amun was a title held by royal women that carried immense religious and political power. So, from the throne to the temple to the home, women in ancient Egypt carved out spaces for themselves where they could wield significant influence. Now, let's travel across the Mediterranean to ancient Greece, where the story is quite different. Generally, the lives of women in classical Athens, one of the most well-documented city-states, were much more restricted. For the most part, Athenian women from citizen families were expected to live a life of domestic seclusion. Their primary role was to marry, produce legitimate male heirs to carry on the family line, and manage the oikos, or household. They were excluded from public life, couldn't vote, hold office, or even attend the democratic assemblies. Their world was largely confined to the women's quarters of the house, the gynaeceum. Education for girls was minimal, focusing on domestic skills like weaving and household management. Legally, a woman was always under the control of a male guardian, or kyrios, first her father, then her husband, and if widowed, her son or another male relative. However, it's crucial not to paint all of ancient Greece with the same brush. In Sparta, things were dramatically different. Sparta was a militaristic society, and this focus on a strong military had a surprising effect on the status of women. Because men were often away at war, Spartan women enjoyed a level of freedom and responsibility unheard of in Athens. They managed the estates, controlled the finances, and were known for their independence and outspokenness. Unlike Athenian girls, Spartan girls received a formal education and participated in athletic training, including running, wrestling, and throwing the javelin. The Spartans believed that strong, healthy mothers would produce strong, healthy soldiers. Spartan women could also own and inherit property, and by the classical period, they controlled a significant portion of Sparta's land and wealth. They were famous throughout Greece for their confidence and influence, a stark contrast to the silent, secluded women of Athens. And even within Athens, there were exceptions to the rule of domestic seclusion. The Hetairai were a class of high-end companions and courtesans. Unlike citizen wives, they were often highly educated in music, dance, and philosophy. They could attend symposia, the famous all-male drinking parties, where they would engage in intellectual conversation with the leading men of the day. A famous example is Aspasia of Miletus, the partner of the great Athenian statesman Pericles. She was a foreigner, which gave her more freedom than an Athenian citizen woman. She was renowned for her intelligence and wit, and sources say that men like Socrates would go to her for advice on rhetoric. While her status was ambiguous and she was often the target of public scorn, Aspasia represents a fascinating alternative to the life of the typical Athenian wife. Her story shows that even in a highly patriarchal society, there were women who found ways to participate in its intellectual and cultural life. Finally, let's turn our attention to the mighty Roman Empire. Roman society, like Greek society, was strongly patriarchal. The concept of paterfamilias, the male head of the family, was central. He held legal authority over his entire household, including his wife, children, and slaves. In early Roman law, a wife was under the complete control of her husband. However, by the late Republic and into the imperial period, this began to change. A new form of marriage became common, where a wife remained legally part of her own father's family and retained control over her own property. This gave married women, especially those from wealthy families, a considerable degree of financial independence. They could inherit fortunes, run businesses, and fund public building projects, earning them respect and public recognition. While Roman women couldn't vote or hold political office, they were not entirely excluded from the political sphere. Behind the scenes, elite women could wield considerable influence through their husbands and sons. Livia, the wife of the first Emperor Augustus, is a prime example. She was a trusted advisor to her husband and was revered as a model of Roman womanly virtue. After Augustus's death, she continued to be an influential figure during the reign of her son, Tiberius. Other imperial women, like Agrippina the Younger, were even more ambitious, actively maneuvering to secure power for their sons and themselves. These women operated in a high-stakes world, using their connections, wealth, and intelligence to shape the course of the empire from behind the throne. But what about women outside the imperial court? Roman women were a visible presence in daily life. Unlike in Athens, they were not confined to the home. They could attend public festivals, go to the games at the Colosseum, and visit the public baths, though usually at different times than the men. In the economic sphere, we find women working in a wide range of professions. Inscriptions from places like Pompeii show women working as doctors, shopkeepers, bakers, and priestesses. The Vestal Virgins were perhaps the most famous group of priestesses in Rome. They were responsible for tending the sacred fire of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. This was a position of immense honor and privilege, and the Vestals were independent of the control of any man, enjoying a unique legal status. Their existence shows that Roman society recognized that women could hold positions of great public importance. So as we've seen, the lives of women in the ancient world were incredibly diverse. There's no single story, but a rich tapestry of different experiences. From the property-owning women and powerful pharaohs of Egypt, to the stark contrast between the secluded wives of Athens and the athletic, independent women of Sparta, to the influential and publicly visible women of Rome. While these societies were undeniably patriarchal, women were not passive victims. They were agents in their own lives, finding ways to navigate, resist, and shape the worlds they lived in. By uncovering their stories, we gain a much richer and more complete understanding of the ancient world. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe to History of the Ancient World for more deep dives into our shared human story. See you next time.